To order. First up, we have roll call. We'll start on the left.
Orion. Sarah Jones-Graham.
Scott Jensen.
Harlow Burnwald.
Rita Bernhard.
Harry Bloodworth.
All right. Next up is approval of minutes. Did anybody have any comments on the minutes?
Comment.
Okay, seeing no comments, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Yes. Good to go.
I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, great. Citizen input. This is for input on anything not on the agenda. Is there anybody that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to new business.
Scott, this is in a little bit of a different format.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to focus on the blue areas. Those will be your script
Okay.
areas. Yep, it's a little different opening statement, a little more inclusive. All the commissioners have a copy just so they can follow along. And on the last page, there's some motions.
Excellent. All right, so this is the public hearing on an application by the city of Scappoose to adopt the Scappoose 50-year comprehensive plan, zoning map, and development code amendments, file number CPA 2-23, CPMA 1-26, ZC 1-26, DCTA 1-26 is all called to order. The hearing this evening will be conducted as follows: staff report, additional correspondence, public testimony will be in the following order: applicant, public testimony, rebuttal, if any, by the applicant. Questions for staff, if any, from the Planning Commission. Close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony comments will be heard unless the Planning Commission reopens the testimony for a specific question discussed by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will make a recommendation to City Council tonight, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain in the future. If the matter is continued to a time and date certain in the future, this will be the only notice of that date you will receive. If you wish to speak at the appointed time, we will first hear those in person, followed by online testimony. For those in attendance, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the CDC Office Administrator, Liz. Those online, I will ask that you click the raise hand button near the top of the team screen and I will recognize you. 6 can be used to mute and unmute. If you have any difficulty with these features, please add a comment to the chat and we will address the issue. Any questions should be addressed through me, the chair. Please state both your name and city for the record, as the hearing will be recorded. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the Planning Commission must use in reaching a decision. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulations that you believe to apply to the decision. Please describe how your comments relate to the criteria. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals or Land Conservation and Development Commission, as applicable based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval in sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission to respond to the issues preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Now I ask the members of the Planning Commission to disclose any conflicts of interest. Please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict of interest and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest, Dave? Okay. We normally ask if there's anybody that challenges impartiality.
This is legislative, so it's a different script.
Just checking. At this time, I will request the Community Development Director, Lori Joseph, to please present the staff report.
Great, thank you, planning commissioners, for being here tonight. I really appreciate all your work on this over the last several years. It's been a lot, and hope you enjoyed your reading materials. So tonight we have Beth Goodman with Echo Northwest online joining us. She will be sharing her slides here shortly. And Liz, you may need to allow her to be a presenter.
I do need a ability to share.
So if you hover over her name, you'll see, or actually if you go to next to her name, there'll be 3 little dots. And just go down to make the Did that work for you, Beth?
Yes, I can share now.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Yep. So we're going to pull up the slides, and Beth and I will kind of be round robining this and going through the slides for you tonight to present on kind of the overview of the project and what we are asking of you tonight.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, please do. And Liz, if you can close the sidebar, it'll just make this perfect. Yep, great. Yes, Beth, if you could go ahead and get started.
And so as I go along, I ask you to stop me if there's questions in the room because you're all pretty small on my screen. So we're working on the Scappoose 50-year plan, which it feels like we've been working on for, 49 and a half years, but it's only been 3 years. The city has put a lot of work into this, and we've heard a lot of a lot from the community that I think is represented in the plan. So broadly speaking, what is the 50-year plan? Well, it started with community vision and community outreach. This is a land use plan, so it's really specific to things in your comprehensive plan about zoning and housing and economic development, et cetera. And so we looked at 50 years of growth opportunities and then also updates to your comprehensive plan. So in here is an economic opportunities analysis, a housing needs analysis, an analysis about public and semi-public land need, which also considered the parks planning work that you did several years ago. And then looking around your urban growth boundary, the UGB, where the city could expand and where the city could grow over the next 20 years and between 20 and 50 years. All of that was considered in the comprehensive plan update. Your comprehensive plan certainly had some older things in it that I think have been updated and pruned. Laurie took a lot of opportunity to do a lot of work on your development code. So we'll be talking about that also. This is all informed by our stakeholder advisory committee, which met, Laurie, I forget how many times, but it was quite a few times over the course of 2.5, 3 years. Your planning commission, you guys, your city council, as well as broad community input. So all of this comes into what we call the Scappoose 50-year plan, and it is in your packet. So what we're asking of you tonight is consideration of the following applications. Laurie, do you want to talk about this?
Sure, I'll just go through this briefly. You can see it up there on the screen. CPA 2-23 is adoption of the housing capacity analysis, which tonight we'll reference for short HCA. Economic opportunities analysis, we will reference as EOA. Comp plan goal and policy amendments, a UGB expansion of 64 acres, and establishment of urban reserves of 480 acres. CPMA 1-26 is to redesignate selected properties on the comprehensive plan map. A map of those properties is on page 506 in your binders. ZC 1-26 is to rezone selected properties on the zoning map. That map is on page 507. DCTA 1-26 is to amend selected chapters of the development code. The summary starts on page 520, and then the full edits start on page 530. And so the Planning Commission's role tonight will be to hold this legislative public hearing, to take testimony, and then to make a recommendation to the City Council on the above applications. The City Council would be the final approval body for this local decision. Beth, back to you.
And so doing all of this has taken about 3 years to pull all of this together. Here's a restatement of the project deliverables. I'm not going to read through that. And then the public engagement, where we started with community conversations and community input at events, visioning surveys, 16 stakeholder advisory committee meetings, discussions with landowners where UGB expansion or urban reserves are proposed. And then, of course, the ongoing public hearings. So a lot of this has required a lot of discussion and a lot of analysis. I have very high level findings that I'll present to you. If you have specific questions, I'll try to answer them, of course. Before I go on, are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any in the room, Beth.
So you did a housing capacity analysis in HCA. It showed that you're forecast to need about 1,284 new dwelling units between 2023 and 2043. You had capacity for about 1,236 new dwelling units. So you had a small shortfall of land, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. About 45% of your needed units are expected to be attached housing, multi-unit housing, multifamily housing, or manufactured homes. So the majority are single unit detached. When we look at capacity, it's unevenly distributed with a surplus in your low density areas and small deficits in your medium and high density areas. We'll talk about how we propose to address them in a few minutes. The economic opportunities analysis showed growth of about 2,125 new jobs, creating demand for about 141 acres of industrial land and 51 acres of commercial land. When we did a comparison with your buildable lands inventory, we found that you had about a 300-acre surplus of industrial land. You did a pretty big urban growth boundary expansion a few years ago, back, I think it was a decade and longer ago, which netted you a fair bit of industrial land. And then you had a modest, a 21-acre commercial land deficit for the next 20 years. A lot of what we heard in the EOA is about desire for more local services, more local goods and services, as well as more jobs.
All right, and
I'm sorry.
sorry, Beth.
No.
I'll go over slides 7 and 8. So
Yep.
briefly, again, I think we've touched on this already. These are our proposed amendments. Amend the comp plan to incorporate HCA, EOA, public and semi-public land need analysis, and the population forecast. This would also propose updates to the economic and housing goals and policies, which both support the HCA and EOA. And then just an update to various other sections, goals and policies to reflect the city's vision for the next 50 years, and again, to modernize that language. We are also proposing to remove a few sections of outdated language. And just overall comp plan updates, they're not done all that often. And so whenever we do get into there, we do look for other, just cleanup items we can take care of. Next slide. And then also, as Beth mentioned, there's quite a few development code amendments proposed, and generally speaking, those development code updates fall into certain categories listed here. compliance with recent legislative changes to address land use efficiency measures. We did consolidate the decision-making chapters, which were originally in 3 individual chapters, down to 1. That helps to streamline. Some items are very similar. We don't need to say it 3 different times, but also to comply with new land use regulations. There are also a number of housekeeping updates and removing outdated language. And you'll see on exhibits 17 and 18. 17 is the summary of the text changes. The summary will also outline what the purpose was for each individual change and generally what the change was. And then the full text of the amendments is in exhibit 18. Back to you, Beth.
Okay, so how we determined whether Scappoose needed an urban growth boundary expansion. This is basically the way the state rules work. So we started with the question of does Scappoose have enough land to accommodate growth? The answer was no. There were small deficits of land to accommodate growth over the next 20 years. And so then you're required to look at what policy changes could make allow the city to use land more efficiently within the urban growth boundary. So those are things like zoning code changes and some other of the minor policy changes we're talking about when we look at this. We'll talk about these in a few moments. Does Scappoose have enough land now to accommodate 20 years of growth? The answer was no. So then you're required, since some of your deficit was housing, to look at an urban growth boundary expansion. And we'll talk through how we did that. It's a rather lengthy process. And the last step is expanding the UGB. So through the adoption process, local adoption by the City Council and the Planning Commission, and then co-adoption by the County Board of Commissioners. That's also required. These are basically the same steps used for establishing urban reserves. We're talking about these, while we talk about them separately we're talking about these right in lockstep because the way you go about doing this is really similar between the two. So our land use efficiency measures. What can Scappoose do to use its land inside the urban growth boundary more efficiently? Well, we looked at some things to reduce minimum lot sizes a little bit for duplexes per state requirements that are new, some middle housing legislation, and then reducing minimum lot sizes a little bit for multifamily. All told, the reduction of minimum lot sizes resulted in increase of density of 3% across all residential plan designations. That 3% comes from some state legislation that says you're allowed to assume an increase in density of 3% for complying with middle housing rules. There was a little bit of revision to duplex parking standards, so 2 parking spaces per duplex rather than 4. And then an increase in maximum lot coverage for parcels with accessory dwelling units to allow accessory dwelling units to be built. Laurie, I characterize these changes as relatively minor and many of them driven by changes in state law. Do you want to say anything else about those?
Yeah, that's correct, Beth. And specific to multifamily, this change was made in regard to the A1 zoning district, which is our high density residential zoning district. We don't have a lot of land designated A1. This did not change any multifamily lot sizes for multifamily housing located in the expanded commercial zone, which is typically where we see our multifamily being built today. So that did not change. And then, yes, the duplex parking standards, that came from a recent legislative change, and the increase to the max lot coverage for parcels with an ADU. That was a suggestion from our consultant who was working with us on the development code updates. It just provides a little more flexibility. In, for instance, our R1 zone, you can have 35% building coverage of the lot. In our R4 zone, you can have 40% coverage. That makes it difficult then to add any type of accessory dwelling unit because a lot of times builders will build to that max building coverage allowance. So for parcels that have one single family home, they can now go up to a 50% lot coverage if they are building an ADU. So it provides additional flexibility for folks to add another housing unit on their property. Back to you, Beth.
So some of the bigger land use efficiency measures came from some rezoning of land. So this map shows you where some of the bigger rezoning pieces, well, where all of them were took place. Some of them are small and some of them are bigger. We've had extensive discussion, especially about the lots that are 51 acres being changed from industrial to commercial adjacent to Highway 30. So we looked at a total of 68 acres rezoned from industrial to commercial, a total of 8 acres from residential rezoned to commercial, and then a total of 4 acres rezoned from residential to park. And that was to a little bit of cleanup around land that is publicly owned by this, that is in a park. I think it's publicly owned by the city.
Yeah, and I'll just interject here a little bit. Just to note that these acreage amounts here are representing the unconstrained acreage. The total acreage of parcels is higher in most cases for these. But in terms of land use efficiency measures, we're just including the areas that have future development potential in terms of our analysis. The other thing I want to point out is for any of the parcels that are within our UGB but not yet annexed into city limits and therefore do not have city zoning, they are maintaining their existing county zoning. And the only thing changing here is that on our comprehensive plan map, which is a long-term look at what is the long-term plan for particular parcels, that would change from industrial to commercial in these cases for the properties outside of city limits, but it does not change their current county zoning until they elect to annex into city limits. And so I just wanted to point that out.
And so those changes, essentially the city is choosing to defer planning for transportation systems on those areas until they annex. I think that's one of the bigger policy pieces underneath of that.
Yeah, and further, the city was awarded a transportation growth management grant earlier this year. And so we will be launching into a transportation system plan update this fall. And that will take into account the new comp plan designations and zoning code change or zoning map changes to ensure that basically the proposed uses on those properties are included in our assumptions in the TSP, which is short for Transportation System Plan. And you'll see later, especially in the conditions of approval, that the property owners whose property is being rezoned or redesignated will have to accept trip caps on those parcels to ensure that it's basically a mitigation measure to make sure there's no significant impact. And this is a requirement when you rezone or redesignate or make changes to your comp plan map. If those changes were not incorporated or recognized in your TSP, then you have to basically mitigate any impacts. And so this is something that ODOT signed off on. We did do a transportation planning rule analysis to determine what those caps needed to be. And you will see as we talk about additional correspondence in the next portion of tonight's meeting that each of those landowners did submit a letter of support that they would accept those trip caps on their parcels. Back to you, Beth. Actually, I think this one's might be, or go ahead.
Well, and so I wanted to share with you what in the end, once you've done all the bean counting, which chapter 2 of our very long report does extensive work about the bean counting. We have a deficit of 44 acres of land in the UGB to accommodate growth over the 2023 to 2043 period. That's mostly in housing and a little bit for public and semi-public uses. Get a little surplus of commercial land because we're rezoning an existing commercial property. Then when we look out through 2073, you have an additional 320 acre deficit across all of these land use types, with the biggest deficit being for housing. So all told, over the 50-year period, the last column there that shows 364 acres of deficit, that's your total. We talk in a lot of these things about the difference between total acres and buildable acres. Well, buildable acres don't include things like floodplain, that kind of things like constraints. So we're looking at a 64 acre expansion for UGB. Of that 64 acres, 44 of it's buildable, some of it's not. And that's just because if you're trying to take in a full tax lot, most tax lots, some tax lots at least, have some constraint on them. So 64 acres accounts for all the land, including the constrained land. And then the urban reserves is 480 acres, and that still accounts for all of the constrained land.
And I'll
before-
just-
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add one other thing. In addition to the buildable acres, maybe containing constraints, it also accounts for existing development that's already on the
True.
parcel.
True, because some of your land around you obviously has existing development on it. Are there questions about the numbers or how we came to the numbers? I know that there's a lot of information in the packet about them.
We do have a question, yes.
So the constraints pertain to either like a waterway or also residence or business that's already on them.
That's right. So constraints would be floodplain, steep slope, unstable soils. And then, yes, so any existing development, whether it's residential, commercial, et cetera, there are certain allowances. We can assume how much of a parcel, say if it has a single family home on it, we can assume a certain portion is developable, and then we deduct a certain amount for the house that's existing.
Thank you.
Or some parcels with an existing home on them are so small that we're not assuming that there's more capacity on it, even though in 50 years or sometime longer, some of those parcels may well subdivide. You just can't bring a UGB in with a bunch of holes in it like Swiss cheese. Before I continue, are there any other questions?
Nope, not seeing any.
Okay. So then going on to the urban growth boundary process. This is fairly high level, and the state has very specific rules around how to do this. So we just talked about the determination of the land need, including accounting for land use efficiency measures. We'll talk for a moment or two about the study areas and then the final study areas. And then there's a prioritization scheme for what land you bring in. First, it starts with urban reserves and non-resource lands. You currently don't have urban reserves. The next time you look at a UGB analysis, assuming you adopt urban reserves, you will have them, and there will be where you go first. Otherwise, it's to what's called exceptions land. And exceptions land are areas within the county with rural residential, rural commercial, or rural industrial zones on them. So they're not things like EFU land. Then you go to marginal land, which you don't have in Columbia County, low value farm or forest land, and then the last priority is high value farm or forest land. That gives you your final study areas. And then you have to evaluate land in your study areas that are all at the same level of priority. So here we're evaluating all exceptions lands against the Goal 14 factors. And those Goal 14 factors, they have to be considered together. They're efficient accommodation of identified land needs. So where does it make sense to expand when you consider connections with the existing city, connections with existing neighborhoods, urban form. So not creating what I call it, an additional amoeba, because you guys have that funny foot on your urban growth boundary, which is not very efficient. Orderly and economic provision of public facilities and services. So you don't necessarily want to expand in the most expensive place to build new public facilities and services. We paid a lot of attention to that and worked a lot with Chris, who I believe is sitting next to Laurie, on where is more efficient to expand. So where is less expensive for new water, wastewater, and transportation facilities. Comparison of environmental, energy, economic, and social consequences. So where do you have lower environmental and energy consequences and better, higher economic and social consequences? And then finally, compatibility with the proposed urban uses with nearby agricultural and forest activities. So you want to minimize, to the extent you can, disruption of existing farm and forest uses. You have to balance across all of those. So here's our final study areas. All of the areas that are in this sort of tan color are exception zones. All of the areas that are in this lightish green color are low value farmland, and all the areas that are in this darker green color are high value farmland. So on your, must be your east side, you've got a lot of high value farmland. And then you'll notice on your west side, you've got a whole lot of areas that have crosshatches. Those are constraints, and the constraints that we looked at, I'm not going to name them all because I'll probably miss something, but are steep slopes and landslide hazards, floodplain, riparian areas, and I feel like I'm missing another one, but I may not be. We looked at constraints and looked at areas with constraints. And then we started ruling out some of these areas because some of them are obviously worse than others of them. Like area 11 and 12 here, they have a lot of constraints. Area 18 is, not connected with the rest of the city unless area 17 is connected. Area 17 is next to this big old park that's not well connected with the rest of the city. Obviously, you've got a few areas that are here along Highway 30. So we have 23 sub areas that we examined closely, and there were about 1,500 total acres in our study areas, or about a little more than 1,000 unconstrained acres. So as I said, for these 23 sub areas, we answered all of these questions, and there's a lot of analysis in the report about all of these questions for each of the sub areas. In the end, we narrowed it down to these fewer sub areas. We grayed out the sub areas that we're not planning on expansion for because they just were lower scoring for multiple reasons. And the urban growth boundary expansion is relatively small, so it's confined to areas that are in blue. Why did we choose these areas? Well, area number 4 has some existing housing on it in a manufactured home park that's long needed public facilities to serve the home park, and it's very well connected with your other parts of your community there. Areas 7 and 8 are along Highway 30, and they are less expensive for services in the long run, and they also begin to connect some areas that would be in urban reserves over a longer time. Are there any questions about this?
Not seeing any.
Okay. And then the proposed urban reserves. Do you guys see the yellow areas on your screen?
Yep, we can
So-
see.
It's in the proposed yellow areas. So for instance, area 21, we didn't propose to bring in all of that because some of it is worse than the parts that are adjacent to the city. Area 7 and 8, these were already blue areas that are being brought in, area 4 on the last map. So the UGB would already be extended to those areas. And then we looked at the majority of these other areas. Area number 3 is an interesting one. It's just north of your airport. There's a little bit of EFU land that we brought in here. I think if I'm remembering right, it was something like 10 or 15 acres. It helps make a connection to this larger area, which is more developable in Area 3. And it's also in an area that already has good services because you've gotten those services out to your airport industrial area. So then you think about, well, I'm being brought into the urban growth boundary or an urban reserve. What's really going to change for me as a landowner? Well, property owners maintain their rights based on what's currently allowed by county zoning. Being inside the UGB increases future opportunities, but does not force owners to develop or to annex. They can apply for annexation once their property abuts the city limits, making the property eligible to connect to city services like water and wastewater. Property taxes do not change when land is brought into the UGB. They only change after annexation, which is owner initiated. And so those things are true for urban reserves, but urban reserves would be presumably brought into the UGB sometime a longer time from now. So they maintain their rights. Property taxes don't change because of being in an urban reserve, and an urban reserve area is the first to be considered in future UGB expansions. So when you do your UGB expansion next time, if you adopt the urban reserves we're talking about, the first areas you'll be considering are these ones in yellow. Laurie, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. And so again, I think we've said this several times now, but this is the comp plan amendment, local file number CPA 2-23. I won't read through that again because we've been through it a few times now. This is the list, though, of what would change should this be adopted. Next slide. Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment, local file number CPMA 1-26. Again, this is to redesignate certain properties from industrial and suburban residential to commercial to address a deficiency in commercial land need and to redesignate selected properties from suburban residential and general residential to public lands to reflect current uses related to city parks. This one in particular, that would affect to rezone Chief Concomly Park to public lands, recreational. Actually, go ahead. We'll just continue. I think that's on the next slide. Zoning map, local file number ZC 1-26. This first one listed here is rezoning a parcel from light industrial to expanded commercial to address a deficiency in commercial land need. That was actually accomplished via Ordinance 921 last August. The landowner decided to take that through a separate process, and that's to support the self-storage facility being built on the old Cinnamon Tree property right now. Rezone selected parcels from moderate density R4 to expanded commercial to address a deficiency in commercial land need. And then to rezone a parcel from high density residential to public lands recreational. Again, that's Chief Concomly Park. And then to rezone one parcel from low density residential to public lands recreational to reflect the current use as a city park. And that's the Veterans Park extension, which the city received a grant for and will be constructing next year just north of the existing Veterans Park. And so again, this is just an overview of what is proposed. Beth, if you want to go to the next, thank you. Lastly, Development Code Text Amendment, local file number DCTA 1-26. This does make quite a few changes to the Scappoose Development Code to update outdated language, address compliance with recent legislative changes, address land use efficiency measures, and again, with those consolidated decision-making chapters, it positions the city to effectively review and approve land use submittals. So we did receive a number of comments after the staff report was published. We did receive this list that you'll see here, which are summarized from the 4 individuals, Maloney, Parker, Keith Settle, Josh Johnston. These are all properties, property owners where their properties are proposed for either redesignation or redesignation and rezoning. They did all submit letters of support for these rezonings, and also recognizing that they need to accept and record a trip cap against their parcels, which they are in support of. Under agency comments, we did receive a comment from ODOT. Previously in your packets, there was confirmation from ODOT, but it was very specific to a certain process, to the locational factors that Beth went over earlier. This more was about the entire consolidated 50-year plan adoption. They just stated that they had no further comment. And then one that did not make it on the slide, but that you have in front of you tonight, was submitted yesterday from the Fair Housing Council and Housing Land Advocates. They stated that they commend the city of Scappoose for the work on this project and support the adoption of the components as it would help the city meet its housing needs. Those are all the comments we received in addition to what you have in your packet already. So everything has been in support to date. And then a little bit before we jump into the recommendation, the criteria for decision making is included generally on pages 2 and 3 of your report, and then fully within the finding documents. Those are found in Exhibit 10, which starts on page 286, Exhibit 16, which starts on page 509, and Exhibit 21, which starts on page 577. And so staff recommendation is here based on the findings included within the Planning Commission staff report dated June 16th and revised 6/25 to include these additional comments. The applicable statutes, rules, comp plan provisions, and implementing ordinances. Staff recommend that the Planning Commission recommend adoption of the proposed amendments by the City Council, subject to the conditions of approval, which I have stated here. The first one is that the city will amend its public facilities plans within 5 years following acknowledgement of the UGB expansion, which would incorporate this acreage added to the UGB. This is a statutory requirement anyway, but figured I'd include it here for measure. Number 2, related to the comp plan and zoning changes. Prior to updating the comp plan map or zoning map, the trip caps as depicted in Table 11 of Exhibit 20 shall be recorded against those properties to mitigate potential significant effects on the transportation system. And then once an updated transportation plan is adopted that accounts for the new comp plan map designations and zoning map amendments, the trip caps will be reevaluated and removed if applicable. And next slide. And so next steps for this process. We do have a city council hearing already scheduled for July 20th, 2026. And following local adoption, we would move on to Columbia County hearings. We will continue meetings with county staff, which we have already started engaging with them. And then probably in late July, we will hold a work session for the Board of Commissioners to bring them up to speed. And then after that, we will schedule the hearing with the Board of Commissioners, who would also need to adopt the same thing that the City Council adopted. That concludes my staff report presentation. Happy to answer any questions you might have. And Scott, for item number 8, correspondence. So I did go ahead and go over that already. Yeah.
So, all right, since the city is the applicant's presentation was covered in the staff's presentation. Do we have any questions for the city staff at this point?
I do.
Please go.
So I have a question. Sorry. I have a question regarding the urban growth boundaries for the properties that are in gray. A lot of them are still zoned RR5, and some of them will eventually have access to services.
Mhm.
What is it going to take for those property owners to be able to work on getting annexed into the city?
So they would need to be in the urban growth boundary to be eligible for annexation. So if you mean the grayed out areas because they're showing constraints,
Yeah, they're right on the county. They would be considered county.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure.
She's looking at page 19
Oh,
of the
sorry.
summary.
okay.
So you know what map she's looking at.
Thank you. Yeah, let me look at that. Sure, we're giving a good answer. Oop, sorry, 19 of the blue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it just looks like we have a lot of gray in there. On the upper left corner under like 1 and 21 on page 20, as well as 3, just kind of the exterior of the urban growth boundary.
So let's see. So so on page 19, this shows you basically all of the constraints. And then page 20 are the areas that we're considering for UGB and urban reserves.
Yeah.
If, again, the area in the center that's totally gray is already in the UGB.
Yeah.
And then any of the areas that are grayed out that we decided that they were low opportunity, like,
Mhm.
is that like in page 20 where it says previous low opportunity, that little gray, are those the areas you're referring to?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm just looking at kind of
Sure.
the buffered area along the edge. So I think it would be West Lane would be the road off of Highway 30. So the cutoff there would be county, even though it's in the urban growth boundary.
And I want to make sure I'm answering correctly because the low opportunity areas in the map on page 20 are not areas we're considering at all. And it's because they did not meet the criteria in terms of constraints. So it had floodplain or it had steep slope, et cetera.
Yeah. So those areas can be annexed.
If it's in the UGB, it can. It
Okay.
can.
If it's adjacent.
It has to, it can be annexed, but it has to be adjacent when they actually apply for annexation.
Okay, even if it's considered on county side or county rules.
As long as it's in the urban growth boundary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and so one way to think of it, I mean, we have a lot of properties that are already in the UGB that just haven't annexed yet because they don't want to, they don't need to, whatever. That's at the owner's, desire to do
Discretion.
so.
Okay.
Same likewise with properties that are going to come in as a result of this. They still need to be abutting city limits before they apply.
Mhm.
But again, the areas that are shown on page 20 as like low priority, we grade them out completely. They just didn't score as high as the other areas that we are considering for UGB or urban reserves. Those are not moving forward at this time.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. And for, we're not quite to the public comments yet, but we do see your hand raised, so thank you. We'll wait for that.
Any other comments by the commission at this time?
With regards to the 50% additional coverage, which I don't recall what the increase in coverage would be regarding ADUs, what square footage are we looking at? there any constraint around like a minimum, maximum square footage that the property line needs to be for there to be an increase in the percentage that's?
No, so the ADU chapter does spell out how large the ADU can be, up to 800 square feet or 50% of the size of the main structure. Whatever that smaller one is, either 800 or the size of the house, 50% of the size of the house. But in terms of the lot coverage, it just depends on what the lot size is in relation to the building coverage. You could go up to, Chris has got a good answer, an engineering answer.
I think R1 is the largest lot currently, right?
Yeah.
So 6,000 square feet. So if you did 35%, which would be our maximum, I think you'd have about 2,100 square feet of coverage.
Then that would change now up to 3,000.
And then that would be,
Okay,
that's, so 900 square feet of additional, which would be over what you could build as a in, you know, the ADU dwelling size. So
okay,
you're kind of covered there.
great, thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, with this, we will move on to anybody who wishes to testify in support of the application. And we're going to do, like we said earlier, anybody here first, and then we'll move to anybody online. So is there anybody here currently that wants to speak in support of the application? Seeing none. Is there anybody online that wants to speak in support of the application?
I think if you're online and you would like to speak, you can press *6 to unmute.
That's what the instructions say.
Oh, hi, I'm online. I just had a question. I just had a general question. This is all new to me. I got a letter in the mail, so that's why I'm online.
Hold on, please. This
Okay,
has to be a comment in support. We
right.
can't really
Okay.
answer questions at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to mute. Thank you.
I think it would be all right to entertain a question. We just would need them to state their name and city for the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can address neutral after. Yeah.
I think we'll go through proponents and opponents, and then we'll come back to you, okay? So is there anybody here that
Great,
wishes to
thanks.
speak in opposition? Then let's hold on to that. Let's get through this step, and then we'll try to do what we can to address questions. Is there anybody online that wishes to speak against this? Okay. And then we'll go ahead and do the neutral, and I can't exactly see your name, but we'll do LM since you asked first. If you want to go ahead and ask
Okay,
your question.
thank you. My name's Laura McCabe, and I live on Wickstrom Road, and I got a letter in the mail, so that's why I jumped online tonight. I just simply wanted to know, how do I know if I'm in the UGB? I really don't even know. Would I
Looks
just
like
be able to
Chris
look-
might be looking that up.
Okay,
You want to chat your address to Liz, and then we can look it up specifically?
let's see. Not sure how to do that. Can I just say it?
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, it's 33397 Wickstrom Road,
So that area is being considered for urban reserves, not urban growth boundary, because you're a little further from existing city utilities. And so, yeah, you are not being considered at this time for the urban growth boundary expansion properties, but for urban reserves.
Okay. Okay, great. That clarifies things. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
If you want to, yeah, please come forward and speak into the mic and say your name and your city. Closer to the mic, please. Thank you very much.
I'll turn that one off first and then. That one needs to be retired. Sorry about that.
I'm curious, are there plans for like mixed use where there'd be commercial property on the ground floor and then residential up and building up within the city limits to meet the deficit numbers that are there?
So we do already allow that.
That's already, is that included in those numbers though, with the numbers that are the deficit that we need? Is there a way to calculate that into what you guys?
And Beth, do you
plan.
want to address that? Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. The question was about mixed use, and mixed use is accounted for in the analysis. It would be hard for me to reach into the analysis, which is very complicated and long, and tell you exactly how much, in part because that is part of the housing capacity analysis, but housing and commercial are expected both in your commercial areas that also allow housing, and some of that can be in vertical mixed use buildings. You don't see a lot of that in Scappoose at this point, but it's certainly something that's allowed.
Yes, that's exactly what this plan is doing. I mean, we're looking out 50 years, and so we're trying to set the stage so that development like that can happen.
East being south of the airport and not the area adjacent to the recently annexed. Okay. So there, yeah, sure.
So I think maybe part of the understanding here is about what high quality or low quality means. Those are defined in state law, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the farming quality on those soils. It's just how the city's allowed to prioritize land when it's coming into the urban growth boundary. So land that's considered higher priority, according to the state law definition of what that is, we are not allowed to consider it. We have to consider it absolute last in the list of land to bring into the UGB. So that land has been categorized by the state as high priority. And so we can't look at it before we look at the other land.
So that's at a state level even though there's residential land, residences all the way butting up to it, that can't be considered.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what do we do as citizens to help that? Because it seems like we're developing up into farms that are, I'm sure there's farms on that side too,
Mhm.
but just to make it more even, because it feels like on your map that it's all really concentrated on
Well,
the
part of
west
it-
side.
Yeah, and you notice that with the Means Nursery, just to the south of Havlick, all that's high value farmland. It couldn't be considered. Even, even in the earlier iteration with the last expansion, it couldn't be considered because it was high value. But mostly a lot of that ends up being constrained anyway, because it's all like floodland.
It's lowland.
It's very low
Because of the
lying
dike
and it
yeah.
basically it's in the floodplain.
High water too.
Yeah, so you can't really effectively
So
develop
that's
it.
why you're looking at the hillside.
And not that we want to look at,
Yeah.
slopes or things like that, but in terms of the scheme that we have to follow for priority, it still did rate higher than other areas in terms of serving it with utilities, the amount of land that was available still for development. And Ashley?
Yeah, and there'll be constraints. Unfortunately, I think anywhere in Scappoose, you will either have floodplain or you will have steep slopes, depending on which side of, the city you're
Right.
on. It's just that unfortunately, when it comes to how we prioritize land, it's the high value farmland as defined by state law that we have to look at absolute last. And as far as getting that redesignated, it's a process you have to go through with the county. Just like we have a land use process at the city level, the county also has a land use process. And that is essentially county zoning.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have a speaker form, could you submit that? Because we will send you notice of the information, notice of the decision later. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. You come up and speak to the mic, your name and your city, and then we'll have you fill out the speaker form in a minute.
Real straightforward. Barbara White, Callahan Road. I'd like to know what a parking space is. When the parking spaces for duplexes were reduced from 4 to 2, I realized that there was a definition for parking space. Does that mean on the street? Does that mean carports? Does that mean garages? Does that mean driveways?
Yep. It means an approved parking location, but in terms of a duplex, it needs to be on the lot with the duplex. So it wouldn't be street parking. It would be either a driveway or a garage. And that change from 4 down to 2 was state mandated.
Okay. Is there a similar single family dwelling, multiple family dwelling kind of definition for parking spaces as well? Just out of curiosity, not really.
Yeah. So the development code does address that. Multifamily, I believe it has to be within 400 feet of where the unit is. And then single family has to be on the lot, again, either in a driveway or a garage.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You guys have-
Let's start with your name again.
Okay, Brittany Baldwin. Yeah, Brittany Baldwin, Scappoose. Are there plans in your plans for parks on the south side of town? I know we have Veterans Park and stuff, and you're putting in a lot of family housing, and we're not really seeing anywhere for kids to hang out, like, or parks or anything on that south end of town, or is this all just commercial, residential?
So this
Planning.
was, we did consider whether we needed parkland for the next 20 years. Based on the parks master plan that was adopted last, I think it was 2 years ago now. There was not an identified need for additional acreage beyond what is already designated parkland in the city of Scappoose. That's not to say that there won't be future development. The city did just have a parcel donated to it just north of Dutch Canyon Road, north of Dutch Canyon Estates Phase 3. And I forget what the acreage of that is, but it would be kept as a very natural park. It has tons of fir trees on it. That actually wasn't in our park plan. So occasionally we will acquire property outside of that parks master plan. But that is located more in the south area of the city. And so it's just a matter of having the funding to develop that for a parking lot and space for folks to actually
For
get on the
families.
lot and start using it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. And for anyone who is coming up, if you could fill out the speaker form, we'd appreciate it.
Hi,
Name and city, please.
Joni Callahan from the Callahan Road. Question for all of you. Do any of you know how inconvenienced these new developments have been for us?
We have,
The
we have
family's
heard
been
some
there
comments.
over 100 years. These people too have been there for years. Even getting down my street through that construction has been a nightmare. Pulling out because there's a house there with a sign, almost hit twice. These are things that we've been here for generations. You need to stop and think about people that have been here forever. Thank you.
Okay. And is there anything that the applicant wishes to testify as rebuttal?
I'm not clear on which impacts the previous speaker was referring to, but I'm going to venture that it was probably related to Dutch Canyon Phase 4.
Sorry, could you, so
Yeah.
that those online can hear?
Just knowing her and our neighborhood, there's, at the bottom, the houses are facing into Callahan Road and there's a lot of parking along it. And the road is painted in a way where it comes like this, but then there's cars parked here. So you have to cross over the line to get to the Old Portland Road to turn left or right. We're having trouble at the bottom of the road because people are turning in. You're in their lane. So it's just unsafe there. So it just feels like there wasn't consideration put into that when the approval of that development was put in. That those, because most houses in that development are like the driveways are on side roads. Right at the bottom, for some reason, you guys put 4 or 5 houses with all the driveways out. Most of those houses are built in a way where the garage is the main part of the floor. So a lot of people you can see in there are not actually using their garage to park in. They're parking outside, either in their driveway or on the street. So you put a bunch of street parking right at the bottom where there's a lot of traffic, people walking and kids. And so it's hard for us to come down and just turn left and right out of our neighborhood now because of that development. And then there was a lot of, when the construction was happening and the road was going in and stuff, there was a lot of hard times with the flaggers and stuff, which you guys may be aware of. But yeah, that was also a hard thing. But I think we're long-term sort of feel overlooked as far as those driveways right at the bottom being in it, sort of how we need to, I think that road needs to be repainted in a way that makes it safe for there to be a parked car enter or exiting and then a car coming in. There's also like probably a bike leap or whatever that is on the other side. So I don't know, just for your notes, she's really mad about it. So, and she's definitely let everybody, she's called a bunch of times. So it's frustrating, but I've almost had close calls down there. And so I'm sure it's happening. Then there's people walking around and then those families will be living there at some point. Right now, it's just carpenters and trucks.
I'm going to say that's a staff response.
Yeah, I'll just say I appreciate the comments. I know I've heard from staff that, there have been some difficulties down there. And I understand, that, it hasn't been an easy development. I highly encourage you to come to a planning commission hearing and come just during general public comment time, or even coming to city council meetings. That is the time to really get your voice heard on, matters of public issue. For this particular hearing, I'm not sure if that's directly related to the comp plan update, but definitely I think the planning commission has heard what you have to say, and I would really encourage you to come back at a city council or
Yeah.
subsequent
and
planning
plan on
commission
it.
hearing.
And we have, go ahead, Chris.
And I'll just, for a more immediate response to concerns like that, I mean, this is not hearing related. I wanted to make, that's why I wanted to flesh that out. The neighbors can get on our website, and there's under the police tab, there's a traffic complaint form that you fill out online, and you can just express those concerns, and those get addressed much more frequently than somebody having to wait for city council. And then they would just refer it to the traffic safety committee anyway. And so to address those in a quicker fashion, it'd be best to fill out those forms online and note those issues. And then we'll be able to respond pretty
We're also
quickly.
all on wells over there too. So there was like a spring in the middle of that development, and instead of, they basically just are draining it into the ditch now. So we're all just sort of waiting to see if our wells go dry. So these are frustrations the neighborhood is feeling over there right now. Just like, okay, that happened over by the quarry. And so I talked to the water people and said, hey, what do we do? And they said, well, if they all go dry, then sue them. But yeah. So just things like that to consider. There are springs and wells and stuff on this property.
Yeah, and with regard to the surface water, that's really just surface water that's coming out of the retaining wall that was like about a 8 or 10 foot cut on the back of that property. There's no well, they didn't drill a well or anything for that.
Is it not a spring?
It might be a spring, but it's basically the
Just-
depth of the retaining wall.
The depth.
Can you
of
keep
where-
speaking into the mic, please?
The depth of where it's at is pretty much the depth of my well, just up the hill. So
Oh, I
like
see.
we're all kind of watching, because all our wells, we can talk to everybody and say, how deep is your well?
I see.
And it's all at that level. So we're all just sort of watching now, because it was diverted into the ditch, which is now wet all the time. So when you drive out, you're like, oh, there's my well water. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens.
Well, yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. Feel free to get a hold of me and we can chat more about that
Okay.
during the week.
Yeah, we'll see.
You can grab my card
See
or I
what
can
happens this summer.
leave your contact information and
Okay.
I can email you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think Liz is saying she has the contact information from the speaker sheet. Okay. Okay. Same thing, name and city, and then we'll make sure you get to fill out a form.
My name is Jason Earhart, and I live in the city, or I live in one of the proposed urban growth boundary areas. And I just had a couple questions kind of raised by what I heard here tonight. And one is, and I may not have heard correctly, but there is a grant for transportation to support the proposed urban growth boundary.
Not so much to support the urban growth boundary, but it will take into account those areas to plan for the future.
And what does that look like?
Do you mean what's the
The
transportation?
transportation, the change to transportation.
I don't expect that there would be changes in terms of the road configuration as it is today, but it will look at the future development of those parcels with residential uses based on the minimum square footages, et cetera, allowed in those zones.
And that is a state grant. So what happens to a property owner that does not annex into the city, that doesn't align with the state's transportation proposal to support the infrastructure of maybe other properties that are annexed in?
If you don't choose to annex in, then you would stay in the county, and that wouldn't have an impact on our TSP update.
I guess like basically is what if the state wants to put a road through your property and you're not annexed in?
Oh,
to
so-
support the infrastructure that you guys are trying to.
Yeah,
improve here.
that's, yep.
Yeah, we don't, and we wouldn't build a road outside of city limits. The city can only build inside city limits. We can't even build roads.
But it'd be
within-
a state mandated thing since it's state grant money.
Oh, no, the state's grant money, they give it to us for specific purposes. It's technically state money, but once they give it to us, then it's the city's money to use. So we can only use it on city roads.
City infrastructure
Correct.
roads. So I was thinking more like a highway, like. 30,
No,
which
no,
you guys don't.
Think,
have any.
no,
No.
no,
but
we're
thanks
not
for
authorized to
asking.
move a highway, thankfully. Yeah,
Just for the study, it's not actually to build anything.
correct.
It's not, this isn't road money. This is just a study. So it'll be a book about double the size. It just lays out where future road go if those properties were to annex in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, secondly, there were people that emailed in that were in support of the proposal. But then there was a couple that weren't up there and you said there was some sort of housing committee of some sort or something.
Oh, yes. So we did receive a letter of support from Fair Housing Council and Housing Land Advocates, which the commissioners have that comment in their packet and it's online as well now.
I'm just curious, who are they and where are they located? Are
You,
they,
you probably would,
Yeah, those are two very large nonprofit entities, I believe, that they operate statewide. And they primarily act as housing watchdogs in Oregon to ensure what's referred to as fair housing. So affordable housing, middle housing, et cetera. They usually will audit
low
cities.
income housing?
It-
That's kind of what it's.
Yeah,
Okay.
lower income, but also middle housing, which isn't always lower income. That means duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, et cetera.
Okay. So not necessarily residents of Columbia County or Scappoose.
Not those.
They're statewide.
Those two entities are not. No, they're statewide.
And then the reason for like you guys, what I heard the study showed that there was floodplains that you wouldn't build on, but the current housing development that's below my home right now used to have a pond there every year that I skated on when I was a little kid. That got filled in. And now there's like a water drainage issue at the bottom on Old Portland Road that Brittany had mentioned. And so I guess it's a tough pill to swallow that there's areas that I've never seen flood that your study shows are floodplains when there is like a pond that flooded in down there that people used to skate on.
Yeah, that's an even bigger animal
Yeah.
called FEMA.
Yeah.
They set the flood maps and it's kind of by law all the way down. That's all we can consider. If they say it's a floodplain, it's a floodplain. And that's what state has to look at it as, that's what the city has to look at it. And there's mechanisms to verify that, you might say,
Yeah.
but they are not cheap.
There are also ways of verifying or revising your floodplain. Unfortunately, often cities' floodplains don't get updated unless you go bug the feds about it. And so some floodplains can be outdated, meaning that real life doesn't necessarily reflect what the maps actually show. It also can take a large amount of time to get those floodplain maps updated. But despite that, the maps that currently exist at the federal level, those are what we have to rely on when it comes to floodplain development. Development can still occur in the floodplain. It just is subject to a major additional requirements, including fill, like you just described.
So for the record, I just want to state that an answer like that can be difficult and frustrating to listen to.
It's difficult and frustrated for everybody involved.
And to segue off what I think Brittany was trying to say about the traffic, at the bottom of Callahan Road, well, I mean, it's been busy with construction. It is what it is. I haven't really experienced that too much, but it does look like that. Let me back up. You say 2 vehicles per dwelling. Is that parked in their yard? Is that what you're considering about, like in the garage, or is that street parking to?
It's not street parking, it's on the lot, so it's either
Okay.
driveway or garage.
All right, but they put in provisions for street parking at the bottom of Callahan Road in front of those houses, and there are people that are street parking down there, so.
Callahan was developed as a collector, and a collector does allow for street parking. But we don't rely on that street parking to serve that requirement for the two spots that are needed for the house dwelling in it.
Okay. And then it's, it's also difficult to hear that, after something maybe wasn't planned out in the best way that it could have been planned out, and there are now traffic concerns, which Brittany had mentioned, to write a formal complaint and come back and try to fix that later. The concrete's poured, the asphalt's laid. And short of painting yellow lines out there, there's nothing really you can fix about that.
Yeah, so in 2016, I think we adopted our last transportation master plan, and in that there were standards for the width of collectors and local streets and neighborhood routes that lay that out, the width of the road, on-street parking, bike lanes, that sort of thing. And so that Callahan Road was developed to the collector standard. And so it, that was a 4-year plan with a lot of community input, and that's what we followed. So,
Okay, thanks for that.
yeah.
And then, Chris, can you elaborate about the hole that they dug? You said at the housing development that flooded, it was a what? And I didn't follow exactly.
On which?
On the, Brittany said that they had dug a hole. It flooded and it was in the aquifer, and you were explaining what that was. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Oh, sure. Yeah, why don't we, I guess, talk offline since I think we're running long.
Yeah. I think we need to get the meeting, like, I love the conversation. And if we weren't in the middle of the actual hearing, I'd
Yeah,
love
you
to
can-
talk about
You
this
can
stuff.
follow up with me tomorrow. I'll
Yeah.
So.
And also, of course, if you have comments about the general comp plan or the 50-year plan, I think that's definitely a great opportunity to provide those. But, I think the city definitely wants to hear the issues with this development, but it's just, unfortunately, we're in the middle of this very specific process we have to follow for this land use hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Beth didn't have anything. Beth, did you have something to say?
No, I had nothing substantive to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And we'll just go back. Is there anything that the applicant wishes to provide in rebuttal to any comments?
No, not at
Okay.
this time.
Oh, sorry. The only thing I guess I would say is what I've kind of been commenting already, which is that the testimony that we were hearing about the particular development doesn't seem to be, necessarily immediately relevant to what you're considering today for the 50-year plan, but staff seems to have, made a comment about it, and we'll follow up separately with those individuals.
Okay, great. And then for the Planning Commission, does anybody have any further questions for the applicant?
No, I do not.
Okay. So then we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing now. I was instructed to use the gavel.
Did it feel good?
Okay, now it's time for discussion amongst the Planning Commission. I've been part of the 50-year committee for, all the years it's been around, and have been following all of this stuff over the years. And as you all know, it's a lot. But it really does walk through pretty much everything, as long as you can find the right spot to read for any particular question. But it's all in here. So, I think it's been a lot of work and a lot of revision going through addressing comments brought up. I know at this, often at the combined meetings with city council, there were issues brought up, but then they'd go back and study again. And I thought it was a really good process, and 17 public opportunities to engage. I mean, there's been a lot of public input, and a lot of reaching out. So I think it's been a good process. I am impressed with the output of the effort. I mean, it was a huge effort when we started it. It's only gotten bigger, but I think it's been effort well put. It was a good idea and good effort put forth, and I think it's turned out a great product.
Do we have a plan for ongoing gathering of information or an ability to do some outreach and continue to bring in consideration from the citizens and residents of Scappoose, keep them apprised as to each step along the way?
I'll say yes, there are. Planning is not the sexiest thing in the world. Like it is hard to get people excited about planning. I don't know why, but so getting people's attention can sometimes be a challenge, but that's a lot of what the public sphere is to try to get that input from the public earlier rather than later.
Yeah, I would hate to see additional, Callahan Road situations.
Yeah, and like I'm curious about some of the specifics of it, as I'm sure city staff is, and there may be some things that we can do a bit better about how, when there's a new development, how they, interact with like where they park their vehicles. I'm completely making this up. I have no clue if this is reality, but it could be that you've got a bunch of vehicles parking on the street so they don't drive onto the dirt of the site and then track all that mud off the site onto the street. That could be part of what's going on. I don't know. Like I said, no idea if that's reality, but there's always considerations, and we can always do a little bit better.
Yeah, I would love to be a part of the campaigner plan to help bridge outreach into the community and get more participation in here.
Well, we can sit with staff and maybe we can put that as an agenda item on a meeting.
Yeah, and we do have a 50-year plan project page that includes all the information there. Obviously all planning commission meetings are open to the public.
Right.
We do not have a city planner currently, and Jay took another position. And so we did receive quite a few applications for our open position. So I would expect in about a month, we'll have a planner on board who, I absolutely have them come and hold a meeting to meet you all and maybe see what agenda items you would like to address in the future.
Okay. Lynn, let's get back to the 50-year plan. Is there what other discussion do we want to have?
I've got to say, I've been in Scappoose for like 45 years. And during that time, I've been involved in the city, the county, a whole bunch of stuff. But it's very difficult to try to figure out 50 years in the future, because look at how much stuff has changed even in the last 10 years. So, you try to include all of that confusion in trying to plan for 50 years. So it is not an easy task. And like I said, I've been involved in a lot of it for a long time. And there's been people that have come through Scappoose, in working in the city and also the county and stuff, who have very, very good intentions. But it's very complicated. It's not an easy thing to solve. And I'm sympathetic to these folks who have these different issues. And I would venture a guess that there's probably dozens more of these exact kinds of situations that they were describing, throughout our communities, in which,
people would like to have addressed. So you're right about, you know, we really need to have, maybe take a better look or try to make a difference in some of the way we do some things. But it's not an easy task when you've got a community that is like this, the one that's rural, that we're getting more folks coming out from the urban areas and such. And I sympathize with these guys because it's not an easy thing to do. And everybody has these different problems, you know, and they want them solved. And I wish we could just snap our fingers and, you know, say, okay, we're going to fix this, but it isn't that easy. And I'm not saying that we can't fix them. I'm just saying that it's not an easy task. And so there's, you know, some different ways. And we're always listening for folks that come into the community with some new ideas on how can we address, you know, some of these problems. So I'm sorry, I just kind of had to get, it's not an easy task. So it's not something where, like I said, you can just snap your fingers and but these guys have done, you know, throughout the years, have done a really, really good job with the city and the county both. And I can tell you from firsthand information after being involved for so many years that it is definitely a difficult task, and it isn't easy. And I appreciate all the work that you guys have done. So thank you.
I'm new, Harry. This is Harry Bloodworth. I'm new to this. I haven't been a planning commissioner for very long, so I waded through quite a bit of this. And I have the one question I have is, I can't get these pages on page 105. The Scappoose is forecasting about 973 jobs to be industrial. But when I look at what they did on the employment trending on page 121, it seems like that was the majority of the jobs we lost between 2001, 2019. So I'm curious what criteria they use to project that much growth in that area. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how they're defining industrial.
I think that's probably a question for me. Can you help translate that to me? I'm looking at the 995 page packet.
Yeah,
Exhibit 1,
page 105,
page,
Beth.
121 on this packet that we were given. It's covering covered employment by industry, Columbia County.
Beth, it's page 15 of your EOA, Exhibit 1.
And it shows, you know, natural resource and mining. We know that we lost those jobs because of what happened in the logging industry, I'm pretty sure. But in manufacturing, that went down 354 jobs, went down 18%. But yet that's what's being projected is an increase of almost 1,000 jobs in that category. So I'm maybe misunderstanding what they mean by industrial. Is that anticipated because of OMEC and because of PCC?
So what we mean by industrial is natural resources mining, construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, and transportation, warehouse, and utilities. So those all together account for what we would call manufacturing. And then hold on for one moment. Let me see the number of jobs you're looking at in Exhibit 1. That's for Columbia County. That's not for Scappoose. If you go down.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding that. What I'm looking at, it says Scappoose is forecast to grow both commercial and industrial. Scappoose is planning for the growth of 2,126 new jobs in this city over the 23 to 43 period. About 973 of the jobs will be industrial.
Right. So can I direct you to Exhibit 3 on page 123? So the exhibit you were looking at before, that was Columbia County. This one is for the whole county. Exhibit 3 here, I'm just going to put it up on my screen so you can see. Yep. So Exhibit 3 here is for Scappoose specifically, where you see that manufacturing grew by 54 jobs, even though some were lost in the county.
Okay, that clarifies.
So what we did is we estimated the total amount of job growth and then assumed a certain percentage of that similar to what the current percentage is for industrial, which is much more than just manufacturing. That's how much would be would grow in Scappoose. And the OMIC is definitely a big part of this. We chose the growth rate. I'm just looking back here. That was similar to historic growth in Scappoose. So over the 2008 to 19 period, Scappoose added about 2.3% jobs per year, and that's the growth rate that the city chose for employment overall. And then when we looked at that as a percent of total employment, we said, gosh, your industrial, you've got a lot of industrial land, you've got OMIC here, which you didn't have before. You're really set for having a different industrial perspective in the future. So, you know, like 30% of your employment could be industrial by 2043, which is very different than most communities in the state because you've got the land base and because you've got OMIC. And even with that, you have enough industrial land. So even if we hadn't assumed that much industrial growth, you'd still have enough industrial land. You'd have probably, after all is said and done at the end of the UGB work that we did, you might have about, you know, no surplus of commercial land. You wouldn't have a big commercial land deficit. These are numbers that are relatively ambitious, but the city's already done all of the planning work and made all of the investments in infrastructure necessary to support that industrial employment. So the question is, what can the city do? What policies can the city have to make that industrial employment happen? Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. I still have a concern, I guess, when I look at the airport industrial park or whatever that's called. And it was developed, but we haven't seen a lot of growth there, you know, actual growth,
Right.
the land's.
Yeah, and I would say to that, you know, it has, the roads and utilities have been put in, but it hasn't been that long, and kind of waiting for those right industrial developments to come. It is kind of a long game. I will say we are very, very well positioned,
Yeah.
More so than most communities.
Yeah, I think we are
And
too.
so I think it's just a matter of time. What the public doesn't see and what you don't see are the project inquiries that we do get in on a regular basis for those sites. And so that's something that Chris and I and the city manager work through to submit proposals on those. You know, some get really close to, you know, capitalizing on those, and others not so much. So there is always activity, but again, it's not going to, you know, kind of come to you folks until they're actually moving forward.
Exactly, yeah,
Yep.
I understand that. Okay,
And the
that's it.
city has made the investments that are necessary to make that happen. So you're not, by forecasting growth there, you're not costing the city more money, essentially, because you've already spent that money.
Having dealt with industrial development, like it's a huge thing to have the land zoned appropriately. I mean, monumental. That's 5+ years cut off a development timeline in Oregon.
Yep.
Having the roads and the city infrastructure there, that's another couple years of advantage versus most other sites that you'll find in the state. Like it's really well positioned.
I work all across the state and I could not agree with you more. You guys are well positioned, aside from the fact that you're not in the middle of downtown Portland. And you don't want to be.
I was
That's
gonna
not
say
what's
no,
happening.
Beth. I think we are well
I'm not
positioned.
I'm going to dispute you on that last point. I think we're well positioned being outside of the middle of Portland.
Well, that's what I thought you would say. So yeah. You're the community that you are.
Okay, so if there's no more discussion about the plan, I would ask if there's a motion to recommend approval of file number CPA 2-23, CPMA 1-26, ZC 1-26, DCTA 1-26, including any revised language identified in this meeting.
Yes. Motion to approve. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of file number CPA 2-23, CPMA 1-26, ZC 1-26, DCTA 1-26 to the City Council and adopt the findings of fact and conditions of approval contained within the Consolidated Planning Commission staff report dated June 16th, 2026.
Including the revisions.
Yes, including any provisions, revision, sorry.
And those would just be the comments that we're adding.
Okay.
Submitted public comments.
And the submitted.
Oh, and the submitted public comments.
Okay. Hearing a motion, is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay.
There.
All right. Yeah, we've got a couple of things left here we're going to get through. I mean, I'd love to chat with you myself after the meeting, but we've still got to get through the rest of the meeting here. So your choice whether to stick around or not, but it shouldn't be very long. Next up, we have calendar check. And Saturday, we have the farmer's market from 9 to 2. Then we move to July. City offices will be closed on the 3rd. Farmer's market on Saturday the 4th. Monday the 6th, the city council meeting is canceled. Saturday the 11th of July, we'll have the farmer's market. And again, on the 18th on Saturday, we'll have the farmer's market. On Monday, July 20th, there will be a city council meeting starting at 6, not 7. Is this a change that the city is moving meetings from 6 to 7?
It was anticipation that this could be a very long meeting.
I figured that's what this one was.
It's just temporary.
Okay.
And I did the same for council, not knowing
Yeah.
how many public comments we have.
I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And then farmer's market on Saturday, the 25th. So that is the calendar. I think I've stood in my soapbox enough tonight for commissioner comments, but thank you, staff, for your good work, and you too, Beth, if you're still here. And any other commissioner comments? Okay, seeing none, staff comments.
I just want to thank you all for your continued involvement in this plan. It's been a long haul to get to this point, and I recognize that you all have live planning commission. This was a big packet to review, so thank you very much for your work on this. I think we're setting Scappoose up for a bright future, and we'll continue to have discussions, and I'll be excited to introduce the new planner to you all shortly. That's all for me.
Just gonna add to what Lori said. Thanks for all your work on this. This is one of the bigger packets I've ever seen. I did 8 years on planning commission, so I can say that with confidence. This is an example of what I consider to be a smart growth. I don't think many communities in the state of Oregon have done 50-year plans. And I think 20 years, to be honest, even though it seems like we can't predict well into the future, I think it's smart in terms of infrastructure to plan out more than 20 years, because to build a well, to build infrastructure, reservoirs, things of that nature, treatment plants. They take, they could take a decade or more. And so we really need to get ahead of that and really look way farther out in terms of those kinds of things, because they cost a lot of money and they take a lot of time to get permitted and built and funded. And so I think this is a great example of just smart growth for us. And it should lay the foundation for master plans to be updated accordingly, and then the appropriate funding put in place to build those things.
I will say one of my favorite quotes that I've heard attributed to General Eisenhower is, "The plan is not important. The planning is important," because you can look back and see why all the choices were made and when they were made, and then be able to let that inform changing your plan at any given point in the future. So that's why having a 1,000-page packet now is important, because somebody will go 10 years down the road. Oh, well, why did they decide this? And being able to have it there, it may be some new technology has changed and now building on slope is no problem. Okay, well, now we know all these areas that we were previously were able to just say doesn't work anymore, doesn't work. We can say, oh, these are now options worth review in the future, versus having to redo the whole survey of potential options. That's why it's, this kind of detail level work is important, because it's not for you now. Like, okay, yes, it is for us now, but it's also to be able to make it easier to change things as the world changes in the future.
Yeah, as a resident in Scappoose since 2017, and now knowing the 50-year plan, I just greatly appreciate the vision, the visionaries that are part of our community and our city. So I just commend everybody for all the work that they're doing to help bolster what we already have that's moving forward. There'll be a little hiccups along the way, but allowing this 50-year projection allows us to be able to try and get ahead or get on top of any idiosyncrasies that might pop up their head and move forward, so that then the next couple meetings go even more smoothly. Any way that I can do outreach, I'm happy to do that right now.
Thank you. We will keep that in mind. And I just also want to extend a thank you to Ashley, our city attorney.
Yeah.
She, she doesn't come to our meetings very often, but when she does, it's because we have a big decision to make. And she's just been invaluable, helping the consultants and I kind of navigate through some of these changes, things, you all might not have seen, but since we started this project, there were certain codes we had to change multiple times because legislative changes kept coming down during each session. So, just trying to figure all that out, navigate that, figure out what's the best development code, language, text amendments we need to make now versus which ones we need to hold a little bit. So I appreciate that.
I've been here over 50 years, and it seems to me that the city's done pretty good in that 50 years. So we have every reason to believe that'll be good.
I think the biggest piece is planning for the future instead of reacting to it. Like, I'm a realtor and there are plenty of people that want to come out here, and what we have to offer and being able to share, like knowing that there's a longer plan than just 10, 20 years. It just gives a lot of hope for.
Yeah, I mean, the state requirements are generally 20-year planning horizons, which means you might have a plan going out an average of 10 years.
Right.
And that's, adequate, I suppose, but it's really not doing the job of planning. And, a lot of our job here is looking 20, 30, 40 years out and setting the stage so somebody can do something. It might not happen for 20 years. But then when you see something happen 10 years down the road, I've been around long enough to be able to see some of that. Like, it's, oh yeah, we set the stage for that 8 years ago, which if we hadn't done the work then, it wouldn't be happening now. Yes, that is what we're here for. So, all right. Any other staff comments? All right. And as always, thank you, Liz. We will call the meeting adjourned.